Since Overwatch's launch, plenty of features have been changed, added, or outright removed. In today's video, we'll be going over all 19 features that were deleted from Overwatch. We'll talk about what each feature did, why these features were removed, and we'll answer if any of them could or should come back to the game. Overwatch was so different from Overwatch 2. It's hard to believe that for the first 2 years of Overwatch's life, there were actually 4 roles: tank, support, offense, and defense. The defense role featured characters that were good at locking down chokes, guarding locations, and holding the front line. It included the following heroes: Bastion, Hanzo, Junkrat, Mei, Torb, and Widow. And the offense role included the rest of the DPS heroes. Fun fact, Symmetra was originally a support hero despite not actually doing any healing, and was later moved into the damage role when she was reworked on June 26th of 2018. The same day that the defense and offense roles were combined into the damage role. Splitting the DPS characters into 2 separate roles really didn't make a lot of sense. All of the characters were viable on both attack and defense. Rarely were the defense characters the most optimal picks on defense, and the separation didn't have any actual impact on the gameplay. The distinction only served as a mild suggestion to the player that, hey, these are the characters that you should play on defense. Now that the cast is much bigger, I think it would be reasonable to give players more ways to sort the heroes. Maybe by the type of composition each hero plays the best in, but the offense and defense distinction was really never useful, so it makes sense why it was removed. An ounce of gold is worth about $2,300 US. A gold medal in Overwatch was worth nothing. Before we had the scoreboard we have now, we had the medal system. A gold, silver, or bronze medal was given to the player with the highest stats on each team in the following categories: eliminations, objective kills, objective time, damage done, and healing done. So, if you had the most healing on your team, you would have a gold medal in healing done. Pretty simple, and it sounds like a fun little system, but any honest Overwatch 1 player can tell you why this got removed: toxicity. See, the medals were really the only information you had on the performance of your teammates. You couldn't see their kills, deaths, damage, nothing, so all you could know is that if you had gold healing on Roadhog, your supports were probably doing something wrong. I think we all know that Overwatch is a lot more complicated than I have gold elims as tank, why aren't my DPS doing their job, but that's the sort of attitude the medal system created in the player base. Maybe the system would work better now that we have more information about how not only our team is doing, but how the enemy team is doing as well. But if you're decent at Overwatch, you know that stats don't really tell the full story. You can do lots of meaningless damage, healing, and killing in a game of Overwatch. If you look closely at the actions that really matter, it's probably like 20%. A clutch nade, a single headshot, those are the types of things that make or break fights. The extra 2k healing you did on the tank while they stood out in the open taking chip damage really doesn't decide the outcome of a game, but it could definitely get you the gold medal in healing done. And if you had a gold medal in healing done on Mercy and your other support is Moira, it's really easy to start pointing fingers when things aren't going your way. While the medal system was fun, it invited flaming and didn't really help clarify why your team was winning or losing. I think bringing it back would really only invite more of that toxicity back into the game. Right now in Overwatch, and for most of Overwatch 1, if the 2 teams tie, you go into overtime, where you take turns scoring until the tie is broken. You know how you would expect tying to work in pretty much every game. Both teams get a fair shot at breaking the tie and winning the match. But in Overwatch 1's first competitive season, a feature called Sudden Death was used to decide the winner of a match. When a tie occurred, a coin toss was used to determine what would happen next. The toss would make one team the attackers and the other team the defenders. Then, a sub-2-minute overtime round would be played. If the attackers managed to capture the first objective on the map, they would win. Otherwise, the defenders would win. Depending on the game mode and the map, this could create some seriously imbalanced tiebreakers. For that reason, the system was removed and we got the system we have now. I think it's really clear why this had to go. It's just not very fair when so many of the maps are defender or attacker favored. Now we need to cover one of the biggest things that's missing from Overwatch 2. This feature was so controversial, it was banned in some countries. Whether you love them or hate them, loot boxes are something only Overwatch 1 veterans will remember. Overwatch 1 was a one-time purchase, and for the most part, all of the skins were free. You just had to grind for them. As you played, you would level up, more on that later, and every time you did, you would earn loot boxes. These would give you all of the standard cosmetics in the game and coins, which are the legacy credits we have now. You could buy loot boxes, and my friends and I would buy each other some for birthdays or whatever, but there really wasn't a need to ever spend money on Overwatch after the initial purchase. This is obviously a double-edged sword. While it's awesome to be able to earn everything for free, if the devs aren't making money, they can't afford to make more content. There was a long stretch of time where Overwatch 1 really didn't get anything new. The fact that you can't get everything for free in Overwatch 2 was a big pain point for the player base. It took everyone a little time to adjust, and I'm sure there will be plenty of people in the comments of this video talking about how they missed the loot box system. Because loot boxes were banned in some countries and the loot boxes weren't making Overwatch any money, it's pretty clear why Blizzard decided to switch to the live service model we have now. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. My dream is to make content full-time, and your support would really help me get there. Then I can make more high-quality videos just like this, start streaming, and do other fun things for this awesome community we're building. I'm trying to reach 10K subs by the end of the month. Thanks for your help in making that happen. Back to the video. We have a leveling system in Overwatch 2, but before it existed, we had another system that I think a lot of the player base misses. Ranging from bronze at level 1 all the way to diamond at level 2901, these were the player portraits that existed in Overwatch 1. As you played, you would level up your account and earn a loot box every time you did. You gained experience anytime you completed any game mode. There was a complicated formula for deciding how much XP you could earn from each game, including things like game mode played, if it was your first win of the day, playing consecutive matches, and grouping with other players. As you gained XP, you would level up and your border would change appearance every 10 levels. Every 100 levels, you would get a star. After 5 stars, your border would reset to the basic border of the next tier, bronze to silver, and remove all of the stars. After 2,901 levels, the border would stop changing, with this being the penultimate border. These borders were awesome. It was really cool watching it level up, and truthfully, I missed these. However, I think I know why they were removed. See, these borders effectively showed everyone the rough amount of time you had put into the game, and people would use this against one another. A gold rank with a gold border? How could you play the game for so long and still be gold? It invited a lot of toxicity, even though it really didn't give you much information. Someone could have a gold border but have played 1,000 hours of mystery heroes. It really doesn't speak to someone's skill in any way. The portraits were account-wide as well. No matter what hero you played, you were leveling up. The borders just didn't tell you anything about the player. I think these issues, combined with the fact that Overwatch 2's design is sleeker all around, explain why they felt the need to remove these. The portrait system was replaced with the player progression system we have now, where you level up badges and earn player icons, player cards, and titles you can show off. This system is a lot more granular, giving you badges for hero-specific stats and specific game modes, but it just doesn't hit the same. I really hope that we get some other kind of player progression soon. Overwatch is a game most people would agree is best played with friends. However, some of us don't have any. Well, in the days of Overwatch 1, that was okay, because the game had your back. On June 26, 2018, yes, the same day the offense and defense roles became the damage role, the looking for group system was introduced. LFG allowed players to essentially create listings where they would describe the type of experience they were after. You could specify game modes, rank ranges, whether you wanted voice chat or not, and a few other options. Then other players would join your group through a menu that looked pretty similar to the game browser. I hear people occasionally bring this system up and how they miss it. Truthfully, I don't think it got used that often. Most often, you'd be looking for a group to go into ranked with, and the ranked system of Overwatch 1 heavily punished you when grouping in larger numbers. If you were in a 6-stack, you would pretty much only play 6 stacks, meaning the games were way more competitive. There wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the looking for group system. I think the player base just failed to adopt it. Also, it obviously was a breeding ground for toxicity. I mean, if you wanted to, there was nothing stopping you from jumping from group to group saying heinous stuff. I only had good experiences with the system, but I only used it a few times. I was always fortunate enough to have suckered my friends into an Overwatch addiction. Let me know if you use this system at all in the comments. I'm really curious to know if it was just me who didn't find it all that useful. I think they could bring this system back, and it might see more use considering the lack of rank restrictions, improved matchmaker, and the generally more competitive community we have now. When Overwatch first launched in May of 2016, it was a very different game, a more wacky game. Part of that wackiness was because you could have any number of one hero on a team. So 6 Winstons, 3 Mercies, and 3 Bastions. Certainly a creative play space, but a bit of an unbalanceable one. So on July 19th of 2016, hero limits were introduced, but only for competitive play. It took all the way until November 15th of 2016 for quick play to be limited to just one of each hero. Could you imagine 3 Kirikos and 3 Winstons? I think it's pretty clear why this had to be changed. I'm surprised it took them 4 months to bring it to quick play. If you ever doubt this feature should have stayed in the game, just go play No Limits in arcade for a bit. You'll quickly see how messy and volatile this experience can be. While No Limits is too chaotic to really be a competitive shooter, OpenQ was the way Overwatch was played for a really long time. From November of 2016 all the way to August 13th of 2019, Overwatch was played with no limit to the number of heroes you could have from each role. 4 tanks and 2 DPS, 6 supports, 3 tanks and 3 supports, or the common comp of 4 DPS and 2 supports. This format and the release of Brig eventually led to the infamous GOATS meta that almost killed the game. Adding role queue to Overwatch was another step in refining and simplifying the game. The best comps in Overwatch 1 always had at least 2 tanks, and this system was introduced to make the game a little more consistent. But as Aaron Keller said in his blog post about 6v6, this took a lot of the creativity out of the game. The team is looking to test different formats, and OpenQ is likely to be re-examined in some way, shape, or form. I'm not here to say what the best format for Overwatch is, but the game has evolved a ton since those early Overwatch 1 days. I think it'd be cool to see what a more refined version of OpenQ could look like in Overwatch 2. Our next feature was never really added to begin with, but I know people would be asking about it if I didn't include it. Truthfully, I don't even want to talk about it, so I'd like to just get it out of the way. Overwatch 1 was left to die so that Overwatch 2 could be created, but not the Overwatch 2 we have now. No, the grand vision Overwatch 2. The Overwatch 2 that would redefine the sequel. The PvE version of Overwatch 2 that was inevitably scrapped. Touted as a highly playable, story-driven experience, Overwatch 2 PvE failed due to poor management. We got the story missions that are in the game now, but they're a hollow shell of what was promised. It really hurt the game's reputation, but I would like to think that most people have moved past it. On the bright side, the devs have focused on what makes Overwatch Overwatch, the PvP, and it's better than it ever has been. Balance or format issues aside, we are constantly getting new content, new heroes, new maps, and the game is constantly being improved. It's the healthiest it's ever been, and I love it. With the transition from Overwatch 1 to 2, the game was simplified in many ways. One of the things that was simplified is something I feel like a lot of the player base forgets exists at all. When the offense-defense roles were collapsed into the damage role and the LFG system was introduced, another system was added to the game, the Endorsement System. However, it used to be a tad more complex. As it exists now, the Endorsement System is a simple click and endorse. But in Overwatch 1, you actually had a choice as to how you would endorse a player. When you would endorse someone, you could choose between 3 options. Orange for shot calling, purple for good teammate, and green for sportsmanship. You still had the 1 to 5 levels of the current system, but around the border of the icon would be a colored ring that was broken up into sections by the percentage of each endorsement you had received. So if you had a mostly orange ring, it would indicate that you were someone who had good calls. Everyone who played this system knows the orange endorsement is the only one that mattered. It felt the best to get a shot caller, and the other 2 mattered a lot less. I have to imagine this was removed just for the sake of simplicity, but I think they could bring this system back no problem. It didn't inspire toxicity like a lot of the other features on this list. However, people would beg for the shot caller endorsement, so that's something to think about. Oh boy, here we go. Look, it was a feature, and it would be wrong to not include it on this list. It's probably the biggest, or at least the most talked about change. When Overwatch 1 became Overwatch 2, we lost a tank player, moving from 6v6 to 5v5. I'm not gonna pick a side. I love Overwatch, and I want it to do well regardless of the format. I've had a ton of fun playing both 5v5 and 6v6. Each have their benefits and their trade-offs. There's no denying the fact that 6v6 offers a deeper gameplay experience, but there's also no denying the fact that 5v5 largely solves the queue time issues 6v6 faced. The conversation is obviously more deep than that, and both formats have their merits. However, I think those are the biggest arguments for each format. Again, I'm not here to take sides. I'm just here to give you the facts, explain why these features were removed, and to question whether they would be good for the game if they returned. 6v6 had a real issue with queue times because there weren't enough tank players. The game was abandoned at the time, but even now there's a big disparity between the number of DPS and support players versus the number of tank players. You can say that's because tank is unfun, so no one wants to play it, but tank is an unpopular role in any game. I could be here forever going back and forth about these arguments, so let's move on. Could 6v6 be brought back? Well, it already is, or at least the devs are going to try it. They've made it very clear that they're willing to try all sorts of format changes from 7v7 to some kind of hybrid open queue sort of thing. They're going to experiment and let us try those experiments. It'll definitely be interesting to see how those things shake out, and we'll just have to wait and see. And then we can know not only if 6v6 is the best way to play the game, but also if it's what most of the community wants. Overwatch has extensive career profiles. It'll show you things like time played on each hero, your win rate, your accuracy on heroes, pretty much everything you could ask for. It gives a pretty detailed history of your time in game. Even though the information from Overwatch 1 was wiped, it's still a cool system. However, in the same patch that endorsements were added, the career profile was changed forever. Before this patch, career profiles were public with no way to private them. This meant that anytime someone wanted to, they could look at your entire history in the game. Was this used so you could better play around your teammates' best picks, you could better accommodate a one-trick, formulate the perfect comp based on your team's best heroes? Of course not. It was used to flame people, and they would find all sorts of ways to do it. Not enough time on a hero? Flamed. Too much time on a hero? Flamed. Not on your most played hero? Flamed. Only playing one hero? Flamed. 5 seasons in gold? Flamed. Made it to diamond but fell a rank? Flamed. Played comp but most of your time is in quick play? Flamed. All your time is in comp but you're not a grandmaster? Flamed. It wasn't a tool, it was a weapon. And players beat each other over the head with it all the time. So in the June 2018 patch, all career profiles were set to private by default. This carried over to Overwatch 2. You can make your profile public if you want to, but you have to choose to do that. You can also make it public to just the people you were grouped with or just your friends. To be clear, I'm not saying career profiles are never used in a constructive way. There is certainly an advantage to knowing what your teammates' best heroes are and being able to get a general idea of what caliber of player they are. But 95% of the time, a public career profile is just inviting someone to say something about your skill or the way you've chosen to play Overwatch. Also, there's questions to be raised about competitive integrity and being able to spy on the enemy's career profiles. If the enemy has a one-trick with a public profile, you can counter them before the game even starts. While most of the things I've mentioned in this video have been from Overwatch 1, our next deleted feature was actually in Overwatch 2. At the start of Overwatch 2, the devs were worried that the game was starting to get overwhelming for new players. Looking to make the game a little easier to get into and increase the freshness of each season, the devs introduced the map pool system. The hope was that this would give each season a unique identity and feel. They also wanted to be able to work on maps, bringing the updated maps back when it was time for a new rotation. It was pretty much a complete failure all around, and in Season 4, map pools were removed. Aaron actually wrote a great explanation about why the system had to go. He stated, "The map roster doesn't have enough maps where we truly need them, and the impact they had on seasonal identity was fairly low. Additionally, the cadence for maps leaving and returning to the pool didn't align with the time it took to make changes to the maps." He did also say that map pools may not be gone for good though. The system might make a return when Overwatch has more maps, but they would likely rotate at a faster rate, potentially weekly. The community pretty much hated this system. Overwatch doesn't have enough maps, and some game modes especially don't have enough to be taking some out of the pool. Maybe once we have 60 maps or something, this would be necessary, but I think everyone would rather have a map voting system before we try map pools again. Pretty much every aspect of Overwatch 1's UI was revamped in the move to OW2. While it may be a stretch to call this a feature, I feel like I had to include this. Everyone is familiar with the current rank icons, but I think the old ones definitely look better, and a ton of people agree with me. It might just be the black outline. I feel like the progression of the first set just makes more sense. I feel like each rank builds on one another, and then there's this realistic quality to the old ones. Each one looks like it was made of the material it was named after. Then when you got to Masters and up, the refraction and stuff in the middle just looks cooler. There's something sterile about the new ones. They're just too streamlined. It's not a huge loss or anything, but I think the OWOGs will always love the old icons more. Let me know which set you prefer. I'm really curious to see if this is just nostalgia talking. The PvE and its cancellation was previously discussed, but we lost something else related to the topic. Something a ton of people have asked to come back. The pre-PvE content. The Archives missions. These were pretty cool for what they were, nothing amazing, but it was just another thing you could do in the game. The new Sombra Halloween event was quite a bit more interactive in comparison, but these Archives events were still special. There were 3 of them: Uprising, Storm Rising, and Retribution. Each of them is centered around an event from Overwatch's story. The gameplay wasn't anything crazy: kill enemies, a few different types of enemies, go here, go there, but the experience as a whole was certainly special. It was really cool to see Overwatch's story in-game and to get to experience it firsthand as the heroes. While the gameplay was simple, it was something really amazing for Overwatch to have at the time, and I think a ton of people miss it. I'm not sure why these haven't been brought back. Maybe there's some technical difficulties that popped up during the move from 1 to 2, or maybe the devs just want to move away from that type of content in general. They might not want to dilute the Overwatch product, and they're trying to make it clear that, hey, Overwatch is a competitive PvP shooter. Maybe we'll get them back or something similar in the future, who knows. During the dark times of Overwatch 1, new content was non-existent. The player base was dwindling and queue times were reaching ridiculous numbers. Tank is an unpopular role in any game, and because role lock was introduced, every team needed 2 tanks. Overwatch has always had way more DPS players than tank players, so to try and incentivize players to play the least played role at any given moment, which was usually but not always tank, the priority pass system was introduced. The way it worked was pretty simple. If you flexed, you would get some passes. Then you could use those passes to get put in a priority queue for the role with the longest queue time, which was pretty much always DPS. Priority passes were really about trying to equalize the population's queuing for games. This had a number of issues though. For one, it didn't work well to begin with. The passes were too easy to get, and if you played the game, you pretty much always had some. And then there's the psychological factor involved in playing a role you don't really care about so you can play the one you want to play. For the DPS player flexing to tank to get some passes, there was nothing stopping them from running it down just to get the pass. It didn't solve queue times, and this was one of the biggest reasons for the move to 5v5. Queue times are still a problem in Overwatch 2, and we still have a disproportionate amount of DPS players and not enough tank players. The priority pass didn't solve this problem, and the system was a failure. The passes quickly became mandatory to play DPS. You can't force players to play a role they don't want to play, so they can play the one they do want to play and expect it to turn out well. Because cutting the tank role in half cut queue times by a similar margin, there was no need to keep this system in the game, and it didn't work. Imagine if the heroes you could play in a game of Overwatch were chosen by a cat. It sounds ridiculous, and it was. Overwatch is a game that once the meta is figured out can begin to feel very samey fast. To address the stagnating metas Overwatch 1 suffered from, and to keep matchups exciting and fresh, their words, not mine, hero pools were introduced in March of 2020, Season 21. For the most part, these were random bans that affected competitive play and the Overwatch League. A tank, 2 DPS, and a support were banned for a week at a time, with no one hero being banned for more than 2 weeks straight. The community hated this feature. It sucked. No one wants to not be able to play their favorite hero for 2 weeks. There are plenty of ways to shake up the meta without outright disabling random heroes for a week at a time. Oh yeah, the cat thing. The bans were random, so it's not like this really mattered, but it's just absurd to think about. Especially when you think about the fact that professional players also had to deal with these bans with their careers and real money on the line. 1 week of the bans were chosen by Zoe Schwinz and Owl host and commentator's cat, Nori the Wizard. They laid out tickets for each role, and whichever ticket the cat touched first were the heroes that got banned. It's just ridiculous. Insane even. I would be interested in trying a ban system in Overwatch, but this is just the worst possible implementation of that. No one is sad that this is gone, and it should never come back. After every match of Overwatch 1, up to 4 panels would highlight the best performing players in a match. The cards would display the player, a hero they played during the match, and a statistic from the scoreboard that they did the best in, or 2 other special categories. MVP, which you could receive for being on fire for a large percentage of the match, and gold medals earned if you had 4 or 5 gold medals. So you might have a card for the most damage blocked, the highest elims, most healing, and MVP. Cards would match the team color of the player, blue for an ally and red for enemy. Here's the part that made this system so awesome. You could vote for these cards, regardless of team, and even your own card. Each player would get 1 vote, and if one card received 5 votes, the announcer would shout epic, and if one card received 10 votes, she would shout legendary. A legendary card was pretty rare, but man did it feel awesome. Not only did you get a card, but almost everyone in the lobby basically agreed that you had the most impact on that game. Right now in Overwatch 2, once a match is over, you get kicked out of the lobby. But because everyone needed time to vote on the cards, it created this post-match area that you could continue to talk with other players in the match. But because everyone needed time to vote on the cards, it created this post-match area where you could continue to talk to other players in the match. I remember both celebrating wins, arguing losses, and furiously typing at enemies during this screen. Overwatch 2 is certainly a less social game, and the devs have said that they want to try and fix that. The card system was something that enhanced the social aspect of the game, and I think 99% of players miss it. However, I do think the devs had reasonable reasons for removing it. It was often a place where toxicity could happen, but I think the main reason was because it increased the time between matches. It extended every game of Overwatch by another 30 seconds or so, and gave you more time to bow out instead of queue up. Overwatch has added 2 new game modes with a third on the way, but in the move from Overwatch 1 to 2, we actually lost a game mode. Assault, more commonly referred to as 2CP, was a game mode where one team would have to defend 2 points and another team would attack them. If the attacking team was able to capture the first point, point B would open up. The defenders have the same spawn throughout the match, just behind point B, and the attacker's spawn would shift after capturing point A, so they didn't have to walk so far to get to point B. After each round, the teams would switch sides. The attackers would defend, and the defenders would attack. The 2CP maps were centered around chokes, and it could often feel impossible to break through the enemy team's defenses. But if you did break through, you could often carry your ult advantage into an immediate win on the second point. The games could also go on forever, with scores of 6 to 8 points for each team, 3 to 4 rounds not being uncommon. The defenders could also stall the game out forever. With their spawn so close to point B, they could throw bodies onto it over and over until they got an ult to turn the fight. One pick from the defenders could often weaken the attack enough that they would lose an otherwise winning play due to these stalls. If you didn't snowball, attacking was difficult, and if you didn't hold well, defending was rough. It really felt like it was all or nothing a lot of the time. With all that said, 2CP was probably Overwatch at its purest. It required the most skill, map knowledge, the most coordination, and demanded the highest level of execution. The average player just wasn't able to meet that demand a lot of the time. Ask any Overwatch 1 player and they can tell you horror stories about never making it past the choke on Hanamura. Speaking of Hanamura, 2CP had some of the most fun and iconic Overwatch maps. I miss Volskaya to this day. 2CP was just too volatile and difficult to be in the game, at least in Overwatch 1. Maybe 2CP could be brought back, but Clash is the way the devs plan to bring these maps back in some way, without bringing the game mode back as it once was. We'll just have to wait and see how that shapes up, but I'm looking forward to it. Overwatch is now a free-to-play game, but free-to-play games kinda suck. The overpriced skins, scummy shops, the currencies, toxicity, cheaters, but for some reason, we play them anyway. Why is that? If you want to know, check out this video here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in-game.